and it will be part of the minutes for anyone to view. A link will be shared in the minutes for anyone who wants to either go back and look at it or who needs to view it for the first time. Appreciate you all being here today. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we can take a look at our agenda today. There's a good amount of activity that we'll need to cover, so I'll ask you to stay with me. Please remember that if you are in your office and there could be background noise, to go ahead and mute yourself so that there isn't any background interference. If you need to speak up, please do, just to facilitate the conversation flow. Let's use the icons in the upper part of your Teams to raise your hands so that we can know that you would like to contribute to the conversation. I'll do my best to keep those, to keep a watch on that. But if I miss it, somebody chime in and say, hey, my hand is up. Then finally, if you have any major questions or questions that are individual in nature, please type them in the chat. But I'm taking notes, and I plan to capture everything that we covered today. All right, so let's get going. First, to update ourselves on where we are. As you all know, we have distributed the information for the payroll standardization part of the project. Know that that is just one part of phase one, probably the biggest part. So that's why we've gone ahead and shared the information with you to get it started. You, as this pilot group, are going to go through the steps that we'll be asking of everyone starting today, and we'll explain those a little bit. But the reason we're having you start to go through those now is so that we can have good feedback, honest, candid feedback from you all about how it's going, about what worked, what didn't work, where you need more guidance, where you need less, so on and so forth. You'll also notice in your email that there are multiple communications coming out more regularly, and that will be the pace through the remainder of the project. You have the frequently asked questions that will be coming out every twice a week, while there's a lot of them coming in, and it may go down to once a week after the questions start to slow down. We'll see how that goes. All right. So I have on the agenda here our attitude poster. So I would like to share this document with you. It is something that I saw on the internet that I thought was applicable to what we're doing here. If you could please go ahead and mute your line, that would be great. It would reduce some feedback. So as we're ready to move towards this action phase, as I mentioned, your complete feedback and comments and questions about your experience will greatly shape how this project rolls out. So we need for you, and I ask for you to be open and maintain a growth mindset as we go through this, but at the same time, give candid but realistic feedbacks, have candid but realistic expectations, and acknowledge the learning curve for yourselves and for the whole group, and do your best to embrace that learning curve. This will take a little bit of more time in the beginning because it's a bit of a change, but as everyone becomes comfortable with it, it will ultimately make our processes more convenient, more efficient, and more accurate. So here we are. I thought this was a fun graphic. If the alphabet equals the numbers equivalent to the number of the letter, the knowledge and information gives us 96% of what we need. Hard work gives us 98. Even though knowing everything you need to know and working hard, it doesn't do as much as attitude, which gives us 100. And so as we go through this, I'd like for you to think about your attitude, or in other words, how you're framing this change in your learning curve as we go through this. So for example, when we use language to talk about this to others or even within our own offices, think about how the words you use can affect your attitude or your perspective. So instead of saying pay being held back, say that we will be paying in arrears to ensure that payroll, leave, and timekeeping are accurate for both the employee and for the employer and for the program fidelity. So using different words, using more accurate jargon can sometimes alleviate the stress with trigger words like held back or delayed, because those kinds of things, those types of words increase anxiety in others when I know that's not what any of us intend to do. Another example is allowing and trying your best to believe and trust in this process. Child support enforcement, you all the county attorneys, you have to believe and trust that we're all going to do the right thing and that we are all going to be reasonable in making decisions, that although it is change and it's stressful, it is not cause for panic, and know that it won't be chaotic if we use our knowledge, our hard work, and have the right attitude about it. And then finally, I will ask that as we go through this pilot process, even though we're being candid, even though we're being realistic, even though we're keeping an open mind, I would ask that you commit to being an ambassador of this transition to your colleagues. We want to know what's really happening, what's hard, what's easy, what needs more attention. But at the same time, it is something that is happening. And so we want to be ambassadors of making it the best possible experience for as many of us, for all of us, but for as many people who are willing to commit to that. So that's my little speech about getting behind the program and being ready this morning. So with that in mind, let's jump right into why we're doing all this. So what we're going to talk about now is the reporting. What we will be doing as we go through this is having you do all the steps from A to Z for what will be required to move an office from whatever they're doing now, no matter what level of automated payroll and timekeeping they're starting at, to where we need them to be by the time we have rolled out this portion of the project. You guys are going to start that this week, okay? So the first thing that we would look at is the format of the document for the report that we will be requiring. And so that format is one of two ways. It's either in Microsoft Excel, the report will need to be created in, or as a CSV, CAT Super Victory, a CSV document. And a CSV document, for those who may not know, is simply fancy programming language for how to make Excel look like coding. It's like words and commas, but it's essentially the same thing that you would use in Excel. It's just in a format that works easy for people that write and speak in coding language. All right, so here we are. We have this sample here. And the reason I'm showing you this sample is that this is our working sample with cases, the IT department, so that you know how this information is going to be used as it is put into Excel. The reason we want these reports to be put in these formats is because Cases is working hard so that once these reports are created by your payroll vendor, they then can be imported into MIP so that certain data will land on certain screens in MIP. MIP users, this will make sense to you. Those of you who don't use MIP as much, it might not make as much sense, but you can kind of figure out why we're putting things in certain places. And then finally, that information is going to be used so that MIP will automatically generate your invoice request for reimbursement for that month. And what it's going to generate on that invoice is everything that you would put on that invoice to be reimbursed for payroll. The report, as well as the supporting documentations for timesheets, those two things together will be uploaded through either the automatic transfer or through the MIP user in your office to support that part of the invoice, along with the other supporting documentation that you already must provide, which is canceled checks, bank statements, and so on. So if you take a look at this screen here, this is a mock-up of how we're going to be using it. We are still finalizing and tweaking a few things, but this is basically what it's going to be. You will have at the top of your report, it will indicate who you are, your county, your office name, the pay period, the total gross pay amount, and then down the column on the left, the first column, will have all the employees' names. So that's what this is, employee ID, name or ID. And this employee information is going to be uploaded every month. So even though there are 2 pay periods within the month, you only submit an invoice once per month. So the day after the last pay period of the month, MIP will be prepared to speak to the vendor. This is the programming, the electronic automated part, and pull this information. And so every month you'll have to make sure by the second pay period that all of your employee information is updated. And your point of contact to do that will be in the vendor software. So you will manage everything about your employees as you do now, but there will be a single point of entry for employee data, and that is going to be the vendor software. And so that vendor software, can y'all still see my screen? I just admitted somebody. If you can't, let me know. So that vendor software is going to sync with MIP to make sure that MIP has the same information about your employees as the vendor software does. So it'll do that the day after the last pay period every month. So the first thing it will do is check, do we have all the same employees with all the same employee numbers, with the updated payment amounts, hourly rates or salary, what their tax and benefit and retirement selections are, all those things that go into actually making a payroll. Do all of those things jive? Are they the same? And if they're not the same, the payroll vendor file will update the MIP system so that they are the same. The second thing that will happen on the day after the last pay period of the month is that the payroll report for the whole month. So even though, again, there are 2 pay periods, your reporting is monthly. And you will work with your vendor. For the vendors who have reached out to me and who are willing to work with me that have dedicated salespeople to this type of work, I will work with them to help generate these reports. More on that later. So that it'll be set up for you. And all you have to do is tell them that this is what you need. They will take that payroll information. That will be uploaded into the system. It will say for each employee what their gross pay amount was, how many hours they worked, how much they were paid per hour. If they were salary, that 1/24 of their salary was paid. If any of the time they were being paid for was vacation or sick or COVID leave or whatever kinds of leave you offer in your offices, whether or not they received any overtime for that period, and the amounts that were paid in conjunction with those. All of that will be uploaded into MIP. You'll still be able to see it through your reports. You know, you'll have your reports at your vendor, so you'll be able to see the report that's uploaded. That report is approved by you at each pay period. So as long as you are reviewing your pay check run properly, there's nothing extra that you have to do to make sure that this report is accurate, because it is simply pulling and summarizing and culling information from your 2 payroll runs for the month. So as long as you have reviewed that, your first pay period, reviewed that, your second pay period before you press submit to pay your employees, there's nothing else that you need to do to make this report come to fruition, because it should be automatically programmed and created through your vendor. Then that automatically programmed created report from the vendor will be sent over to MIP. MIP will import some of the data. So there'll be like the employee tab that's on MIP, where you can see all the details about an individual employee. There's the time allocation tab where you'll get to see the hours worked and whether it's vacation and so on. And then the benefits and tax and direct cost tabs will have more information on it as we go forward. So all of those things will be taken from your report and put into MIP. So number one, it can be seen and retained for audits. You know, if you stop being the county attorney, if your office manager changes, we don't have to worry about what's happened to the files when an auditor comes 2 or 3 years later, or even the next year, because everything will be stored that is required to support your payroll in the MDPS MIP system. Once all of that's received and stored, the invoice will start to be generated. That invoice will be generated with the payroll information from the report to say, this is how much my reimbursement for payroll expenses should be for this month. So at the end of July, and it is creating your payroll invoice. It'll be ready to go by July 1st. That's literally, it's an instantaneous type of thing. Once cases programs MIP talks to your employee vendor. It's the computer works its magic in the coding, and that invoice is immediately created. So on the 1st of the month, your invoice has already been started so that you can use that invoice. Of course, take a look at it. Just give it an eyeball. Does it match what you did for payroll? Excellent, ready to go. And then you can add your direct costs and other expenses to that invoice to submit by the 5th to DGA. You submit it with all your supporting documentation so that the reimbursement process can begin. That flow, hopefully, once we get accustomed to it, once we go through this pilot, once we get through a couple of pay periods with everyone across the state, that process should be so automatic that it is extremely efficient and requires minimal, at least the payroll portion of it will require minimal touching and time from human hands in the system. So that is what the report is. It is simply a chart of all of your employees and then across all of the information that we need, all of the information that is needed for the requirements. Can everybody see the requirements there on the screen now? If you cannot, please let me know. So you see the vendor timekeeping requirements. These are the number 2 here, A through N, will be the items that go across the tops of the columns. Your employees' names will go down in the rows. That's it. It is a very simple report, but it's got a lot of detailed information, and we have to make sure with our vendors that it's programmed to pull the information and organize it in the right way. We've had a lot of questions about, well, let me stop there. Any questions about that? Raise your hand or chime in if you have a question about that. All right, hearing none, I'll move on. We've had a lot of questions about timesheets. We are recommending and very, very, very strongly encouraging that you use an automated timekeeping system. There are many ways that you can use an automated timekeeping system. The information that is captured is exactly the same as what you do now to track your time, except you would be doing it electronically. So you would write down, I worked 8 hours today. You write down, I worked 4 hours for child support enforcement. If you're an attorney, you're going to be writing down that I spent 6 minutes on this case, 10 minutes on this case in court, or doing research or administrative, and here's my docket to support it. So you're capturing the exact same information that you have always been able to capture, but you are capturing it electronically within the vendor system so that you don't have to double entry anything. That information is automatically used to create your payroll support. So when your taxes, other deductions, and gross pay, all of that is automatically talking to this information when you capture your time in your payroll vendor so that you don't have to do that step. Again, it increases efficiency and accuracy. Good payroll vendors will have this capability for you to access from any computer, tablet, or phone, any electronic device from anywhere, because it is a web-based system that you log into, and you can clock in and clock out at any time. And we're using the terms clock in and clock out, not like we want to watch what you're doing on every single step, but to indicate that you are telling the system that this is where you are and how much you should be paid for, the same way you do on your CS21s and your CS 21.1 and summarizing it on the CS22 information. It is the same thing. In the payroll vendor world, sometimes they call those punches, like you used to punch an old-fashioned time clock, for example. It is time tracking is another way to think about it. Keeping track of your time or timekeeping, all of those things are synonymous. And basically, it is the same stuff that you have to put on your CS21, except it's automated. So for example, you can program in your office, whatever your office's policies and procedures are for accruing sick leave or vacation time. You can program all of that into the vendor software. And so your employee says, I would like to take off, it's spring break next week for my kids. I want to take off Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because we're going to go somewhere, you know, in these COVID times, I don't know, go camping for 5 days. And they can just put into the system that they need to go and be off on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And the reason for that is spring break vacation. They can pay all that notation in there. The system will talk to how it's programmed, and it will see, well, this person has accrued 8 days of vacation time. They haven't taken any so far. We'll subtract 3, and they have 5 left. You don't have to do any math. You don't have to do any entering. You don't have to do any configuring or checking back and forth on a notebook or a calendar. The system will automatically do that. Then when you go to pay them, they will not have clocked in or done anything or kept any time for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday because they've been off for vacation. When they come back on Thursday, they'll simply start what they're doing. They'll say, I start at work at 8. I work till noon. From noon to 12:30. I don't get paid for lunch, so I just said I took my lunch from noon to 12:30. I came back at 12:30 and I worked until 2, or I worked until 6. Whatever the case is, that's already there. And they'll do that for every day they work. At the end of the pay period, they look at it, because they're able to sign on and see it. They'll look at it and they'll say, yep, this is accurate for these days that I worked. This is what I did. I approve. It's like signing your name on the bottom of your timesheet. Then it is automatically sent by the deadline to the next line supervisor. So whomever else in your office is responsible for that second signature can look and say, yes, I agree. This looks like what they were supposed to do. They have agreed. This is what they did. I agree too. You click submit or approve or accept. And that is the same thing as putting the second signature on your timesheet. Then that information is still in the system. When your payroll person goes into the system to process payroll that 3 or 4 days before payday, they say, yep, everybody has approved what they're supposed to approve. These numbers look like what I expect our payroll to look like this week. Submit. Then that information is automatically sent to the payroll vendor. The payroll vendor looks at it and says, we accept it. It looks like the parameters you asked us to follow. and then they communicate back to you, we will take out this much to pay your employees, this much to pay your FICA, this much to pay your local tax, your state tax, retirement on behalf of your employees. Sorry, this is how much the retirement's going to be. This is how much insurance is going to be for your employees. This is how much how much came out that your employees paid from their paychecks for the insurance. So all of that data is kept in there. And you say, all right, we're good to go. So let's say, for example, that's on Wednesday. On Thursday, the payroll company will do a sweep of your account. They will come into your 4D account and take out the amounts that they indicated for payroll. And that payroll amount will then be distributed to your employees via direct deposit. So when they wake up on Thursday morning, actually not even when they wake up, at midnight on Thursday, midnight 01, boom, their paycheck is there. If they want to see their pay stub immediately, they log on to the system. They can see their pay stub and see what all their deductions and contributions and taxes and all of those things were. You can even set it up so that it sends an email or a text and they just do a one click to log in. So there's lots of ways that this will automate that system, and it's maintained and kept in there. Second to that, when it's time to pay your taxes, you set up with your payroll vendor how you pay your taxes. I pay mine every pay period. I pay mine monthly, or I pay these monthly and I pay these quarterly. Then what they'll do is at the designated time to pay those, they'll sweep your 4D account again for the amounts that were on the reports that you already had to distribute that to your tax, insurance, retirement, and you will have the chance to select, do I need them to send me a paper check to submit to retirement? Do I need them to just calculate the retirement for me so that I can then go on to the CERS system and make that payment? Do I need them? And with all taxes, all payroll vendors have the connections to pay your taxes, state, federal, local, municipality, all of those county taxes. Where you'll need to make a choice with them is on retirement insurance payments. And each vendor is going to have their rules for that, whether they will just calculate it for you and send you a check, or just calculate it for you and you write a check, or calculate it for you and you go online to make that payment. Once that's done, that's all on the report. It's all tracked in the system the way we've asked it to do during the implementation phase when we've set up your office, so that second pay period of the month happens, boom, employees are paid. We know how much has gone out from your accounts because that is tracked in the system as well. The report that's generated will say, for payroll expenses for this month, this is what happened in this county's office. It uploads into MIP overnight. MIP then takes that, creates the payroll portion of your invoice. That day, on the first of the following month, you go in, you add your other items to the invoice, click submit. Right, so that's the flow. You have a question in the chat box. So someone asked, if we don't have a child support computer in our office, can time be captured or recorded from any device? That question is a good one. Yes, any device. Each employee has their own login. So working from home and they're using their state-issued laptop, they can log in there. Sitting in court, then they can pull up their smartphone, log in. Each vendor of merit, and I keep saying vendor of merit, we'll get to that in a minute. Each good vendor is going to have these services for you included in the cost so that it is easy and actually efficient for you to log in. So any computer, any tablet, any phone connected to the internet can be used to capture time. Next question. Let's say we forget to clock in because they are in court or whatever the case may be. Can they go in and enter time with no penalty or problem? Absolutely. So that review process that I mentioned to you is available at any time during the pay period. So let's say you've been in court all day. It is not reasonable, and nobody has suggested that it is reasonable. you've got a long docket. Excuse me, Judge, I need to clock into my phone and change my time tracking. That is not an expectation. It's not reasonable, and that's not what we're asking. But you'll know what you've done. So at the end of the day, you can sit down at the computer, sit on your phone, and enter in what you did for that day. You can also do it at the end of the week. You could do it at the end of the pay period. You will determine through using the system when is the best frequency for you to catch those up. Secondly, you're reviewing the pay period as an employee at the end, and you see that on Tuesday of the first week of the pay period, you forgot to clock out. You can add in, I forgot to clock out this day. You can add in the time that you clocked out or the number of hours that you worked. Supervisors, the employee has said, yep, this is accurate. You're doing your second review to put that second signature on the pay period, and you notice, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. This employee shorted themselves, or there's incomplete clock-in information. The timekeeping doesn't look quite right. You can send a message to the employee. You can get up and walk over to the employee and say, hey, we need to correct this. Can we correct this now before we put that second signature on there? You'll correct it in the system. You'll click save, and then you'll be able to accept it or approve it for that second signature and move it on. So anything up until the time that the payroll batch is submitted can be edited, altered, reprogrammed, updated at any time. You have complete control over that. Any other questions right now? All right. Next. And what I'll do, just so you know, there will be a packet that's put into this calendar invite at the end with all this information for your review, along with the link to the video in the notes here. So we've looked at format, we've looked at comments, we've looked at purpose and use. So what are you supposed to do now? What I would like for all of you to do that are involved in this pilot is this. Between now and April 15th, everyone should have a payday. What I would like to have happen between now and 24 hours after your next payday before April 15th is for you to create the report. What does that mean for you? If you already have a payroll vendor and you know how to use the system, do you go in and create that report yourself? You can do that. If you already have a payroll vendor and you don't know how to make the report yourself, do you contact your vendor and say, hey, I need a report that has a row of employees and columns across with all this information, and they help you create that report? If you use a bookkeeper who has some kind of software, you've talked to your bookkeeper and said, at the end of the payroll period, what I need is this Excel form spreadsheet where the names of the employees are in a column and across the rows is all of this information. If you're doing your payroll in-house, I want you still, if you haven't made your vendor selection or engaged a vendor, I still want you to create that report. The reason being is because this will help me understand the process that it takes for people to make the transition from self-administering payroll to making the next step to putting together an electronic payroll report, and then we'll help them communicate with vendors once it's chosen. So everybody is starting at a different point, but we're all going to the top of the same staircase. And so I want to be able to monitor during this pilot process, no matter which step you're starting on, what it takes for you to get from that step to the top of the staircase, which is everybody doing the standardized payroll reporting. And so no matter where you are, start with that. So within 24 hours of your next payroll, I would like for you to email me the report. You're not worried about syncing it or anything like that. I just want the report created and sent to me. Anybody have questions about that? Robin has asked, do I have the report form in Excel format? No, I do not, because it is going to be the office's individual responsibility to work from where they are now to create this report. So if you already have a vendor, you need to talk to your vendor to create that report. You have already everything that's going to be on the report. On the first row is the names of employees. Excuse me, first column is the name of employees. The rows across the top are these requirements right here. And so you need to work with your vendor or your bookkeeper to create these reports, because we're not going to be creating the reports, and each vendor may have some different way that they create it. And so because the vendor is going to be your contractor, not child support enforcement's contractor, the vendor is your contractor, you'll need to be sure that you understand how to talk with them, that you are able to evaluate how they can support and serve your needs, whether or not you're getting your value for what you're paying for. So we're not going to provide you with the format, because we're evaluating all of that as we go through this. All right. I lost my agenda. What am I going to talk about next? There it is. Okay, so as you go through the process, then I'm going to create a survey that will be linked in these notes. And the survey is going to have you respond, talk, react to the process. So I'll give you several days after you submit the report. You can fill it out at any time. So probably by April 20th, you'll need to respond to the survey and say, it was extremely hard for me to work with my vendor to create this. My bookkeeper is totally confused. I hate this. Now, I hope nobody says I hate this, because we've already talked about growth mindset and attitude. But what you can say is that this didn't work for me because, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for issues and questions that we can solve. So think about turning any unpleasant experiences into questions that can be answered, into problems that can be solved when you answer the survey. And I'll give you reminders as we go through this process. You'll get reminders from me, but that's what our task is going to be between now and April 15th. Kim has asked, would we be better to select a vendor by the end of the month so we can begin this process with the company we intend to use? I will leave that up to you, but I do want some people to start with where they are now, because every county is going to start from a different place, and I would like to have some feedback. But if you do choose to do that, you know, you would need to work with, in terms of it being reimbursable at this time, I'll have to check on that for you, and any costs and things that would entail, because it's not the beginning of the budget year. So if you do that, Lily and Steve and Chris, I think, are on here. We'll need to follow up and find out how we'll handle that. But if you choose to do it yourself at this time, go ahead and do it. And then you'll be able to provide me with great feedback as we go through this, because we're going to do it for this first pay period. We're going to evaluate the feedback, answer the questions, solve the problems, and then we're going to do it again for another payroll. See if that made it better. Did the tweaks work? Did it get easier? And so on and so forth. And so we have approximately April, May, June. We have 3 months. So that is approximately 6 pay periods to try this out, to tweak it, to answer questions, to solve problems before we will start to train and ask other people to do it. Okay, so all this information for you all doing this for us in April and May is going to help shape how we train and start to present this statewide beginning in June. And so that's why you're starting this now. And I want to get good feedback from people starting from all levels. All right. Any questions at this point? Uh-oh, I got too much stuff. Okay. So that's where we are. That was a lot. Again, you'll get this whole packet of all the documents you're seeing this morning so that you can review it. You'll get the recording. You also have 100% access to me. As you go through the next couple of weeks and also the rest of the pilot project, make sure that you don't sit on pressing questions or issues, that you reach out to me right away. That also helps me test and understand what any roadblocks or difficulties are so that we can be prepared for those as we roll this out across the state. All right, so this last 20 minutes or so, we're going to do what I'm calling a pulse check. I want to give you some tips, and then I want you to tell me in this meeting, right after I give these tips, if you think this would be useful to everyone across the state at this time. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the reasons for selecting and standardizing payroll. I've already submitted and given this, that's the wrong document. Hold on, I'm ahead of myself. Let me try this again. This is the document I want. Okay. I've already given this MDPS payroll standardization talking points document to the county attorney work group. But basically what this does, it's just a one-pager that goes through some reasons that we're doing this. We've been communicating and talking about this since September of last year, but I know sometimes things don't start to sink in and become real to folks until it's time for them to actually do it. And so some people might be like, wait, how do we get here? What's going on? So this document can help with that. So basically it goes over the reasons for standardization in general, which I went through quite a bit with you guys here at the beginning, more efficient and accurate payroll, more efficient review leading to faster reimbursements, to create an environment where you all can ultimately spend more time on your actual job and less time on dealing with these administrative tasks. Then third, more accurate record keeping and audit compliance fidelity. This also, because in the nature of the business, there's transition in office managers and caseworkers and county attorneys when elections or things change, other job opportunities come up for anyone. This way, the records that are required, we don't have to worry about how they're transferred between offices and where the records are and things of that nature. If there's any sort of acts of God and things are destroyed, we still have some records electronically for how to keep, for how to support what we've paid out in payroll. All right, but we also know change is hard. Everybody is having to change right now. The accounting department, the IT department, central office staff, county attorneys, caseworkers, office managers, bookkeepers, everyone involved in this is having to change right now. And so we're all feeling it. So just know that you're not alone. And if you feel like you're out there floating in space, reach out to me at any time. Please do. I've had multiple conversations over the last couple of weeks with bookkeepers, with office staff, with attorneys. I'm happy to do that with anyone at any time. So thinking about the MIP system itself, the reasons for standardization are related to clarifying some timesheets. Sometimes they're handwritten. The formats haven't been the same, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that that just improves. The signature process will be eliminated because it will have gone through a double electronic approval process. Again, this all speeds up the review process. Attorney time logs, they look different. The uniformity is going to help DGA to review and get reimbursements and get people paid faster. Easy to create a single month report. Eliminates manual adding of hours on multiple fronts. You know, every time somebody has to re-enter something, the opportunity for error increases. And so by it being a single entry and then a report being created, people aren't having to add and re-add and add and re-add, creating errors and resulting in things being returned and recalculated. Reimbursement processing, again, eliminate errors and helps to track paychecks. Everybody gets everything the same day and the same time. And then, being able to provide your bank statements that your payroll has cleared the bank happens at one time. So you don't have that when you, for your reimbursements, you don't have that lag in being reimbursed because a paycheck hasn't been cashed or something of that nature before the month ends. So give me a thumbs up or some verbal or something in the chat. Do you want this document? Is it helpful to you? Anybody? Someone? All right, awesome. So I will include this in the packet as well. Thank you for responding. Okay, next. Tips for payroll vendor selection. It is time for people to make their choices. I know that you have been bombarded with information from different vendors, from absolute, complete, full service explanations in 40 minutes or less to simple, straightforward presentations to just an email that says click around here. Our recommendation is that you go with a single full service vendor. And that means somebody who can do payroll, someone who can do taxes, someone who can do timekeeping for you because of the integration we discussed earlier in the process. Whether you already have a vendor and you need to determine whether you want to change or increase your services with that vendor, whether you have a vendor and you may need to change, or your bookkeeper has a vendor and they may need to change, or you don't have a vendor at all and you're trying to pick one. I came up with this tips selection. I did some searching around and it gave some tips. Questions that you want to ask when you're assessing whether or not your vendor is for you. Because what you'll start to find, and you may have seen in some of our demonstrations, is that all good reputable vendors pretty much offer the same service, but it's how they support that service and how they relate to you that probably is going to make a bigger difference on whether or not it's a successful relationship. So how big are they? Do they have customers that do what we do? Do they have customers that are about the same size that you are? Some vendors don't have anybody that's less than 50 employees. Some vendors are accustomed to serving small employers that only have 4 or 5 employees. Please know that the size of your office does not determine the need for the standardization. Just because you're small doesn't mean you don't need a standardized payroll. What's their service history? Small to medium business, what can they provide for you? Think about who answers the phone and what they know. Think about how quickly your emails are returned. Think about how clear the answers are when you ask them. Think about pricing. We already know that it is a cost. We have already determined, the commissioner and Lily, the director, have said from the beginning, your cost will be reimbursed. And the reason is because it's important, and the savings program wide will come from less time on payroll once everybody's comfortable with it, less time for invoices being returned, less trouble with audits and things of that nature. So the overall value of a standardized payroll service is recouped system-wide, program-wide. So you don't really need to worry about that. So I'm not saying go out and spend money on getting a platinum encrusted doorknob. You don't need to do that. But you also don't need to go out and buy, a rickety crate. You want to get a vendor that does what we need and what you need it to do, and that can support you and provide you with the right service. That may not be the cheapest one. The cheapest one may be more of a headache in the end because things aren't as automated, because the service isn't as good, because they don't return phone calls. So you really need to be thinking about that. Price itself should not be your only determining factor. If you want to read the whole article, it's hyperlinked. Here's a couple other tips. When you administer payroll taxes in-house, that means if you're going to have your bookkeeper do it, you need to make sure that whatever your bookkeeper is using can do all of this, because you're, as the Child Support Enforcement Office, are going to be responsible for meeting the minimum requirements. So anybody that you contract with, you're responsible for making sure that they can meet the minimum requirements, so that ultimately you are meeting the minimum requirements. I know you understand this, but just make sure you're thinking about that when you're talking with your bookkeepers, office managers, and things of that nature. And then integration capabilities. As mentioned, a single source for creating and dealing with your payroll and your taxes and your insurance and your retirement is the best way to go, because again, it's one button click. If you have one system for paychecks and one system for retirement and one system for timekeeping, you'll have to spend time to put all those things together to create the reports and the records you need. If they are incorporated into one vendor, into one service, and fully integrated so that it'll talk to your accounting software for your overall bills at the end of the month or whatever the case may be, it can talk to those, okay? And there's a link to these articles. Also, a simple Google search will give you lots of other articles as well, but I just thought these were the best worded to get onto a one-pager. What do y'all think about this? Is this helpful?
Yes.
I got a thumbs up. Got a few yeses. All right, very good. So this will not only go out, these documents will not only go out to you, they'll go out to everybody across the state shortly after this meeting. Okay, what's next? All right. For the last 8 minutes, I intended for it to be 10 minutes, but it's going to be 8 minutes. Let's do a quick check-in with you guys. Does anybody have anything that is pressing, concerns, questions, accolades, compliments that you want to express to this group right now? Now's your time. You can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand and chime in. Or I can just call on folks. I'm sure y'all have something to say. Julie, go ahead.
Okay. I know the payroll, so it's going to come from you. It doesn't have to be in our bank account. So if the system, if they're doing our retirement and our taxes, so are you going to cover that, or do we have to make sure that we've received our reimbursement and that our money's in our account?
So you will be responsible for making sure the money is in your 4D account at the time the sweep is done, but it is, you know, it's done on the same schedule that it would be done now. We're not asking you to change that schedule. So, you know.
But we don't have money now. I have to keep borrowing because I don't get my reimbursement on time. So I guess I'll still be doing that.
So you say you don't get your reimbursement on time. Would you mind to send me,
now I have the last 2 months, maybe 2 months, I think.
Okay. Well, let's try to talk a little bit about maybe what is causing that delay, not here, but individually.
Okay, thank you.
So that we can work on that. Here's another question I have. What do you all think, if you are in a county that often or regularly has an issue with having the money in your account at the time for payroll, would you be interested in us being the child support office, providing you with some support? And I don't necessarily mean financial. It could be financial. It could just be budget. It could just be, it could be whatever, any kind of support to help you get back on track for this fiscal year. Is that, if you're in that position, do you think that there is a need for that type of support? Or if you want to think about it, email me. Shannon. Go ahead, Shannon. You might be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
There is a need for that type of support because I've run into that for 20 some years here in Menifee County. And at the end of the year, when they start all the recoupment, then we run short on funds, and it's just myself and the county attorney here, but we're often waiting until we get the July reimbursement, or the 1/12 in July, to catch up payroll from the previous fiscal year. So I think any help would be beneficial.
Okay, I've written that down. Kim has written in the chat, is there someone with great knowledge on Excel that can help me create this document? Send me an email, Kim, and I can get you the support. It's probably one of the simplest functions in Excel, so I can walk you through it. And anybody else who might need it. What else? Anything else? Tambra has asked, with regards to the CS 21-1, will CSA be giving us a standardized attorney summary form explaining their time to go along with that? Also concerned with the time for returning the 4D invoice by the 5th. So yes, the CS 21-1, in the event that you choose not to use electronic payroll timekeeping, there will be a new standardized required 21-1 and 21. They will be required, meaning that your support must be submitted this way if you do not use electronic. But again, we are strongly encouraging that you use an electronic payroll timekeeping, time tracking service with your vendor. Then her second question, also concerned with the time for turning in the 4D invoice by the 5th. Tambra, if you don't mind to reach out to me individually to talk through what some of those issues might be. And then we can work on it. Figure something out. We have just a couple of minutes. Is there anything else right now? Okay, everyone. Remember, you'll get a packet right after this meeting. It will be added to the calendar invite with all of the documents that you saw today. Remember that your tasks are within 24 hours of your next payroll to email me the report, whether you get it from your vendor, your bookkeeper, or you create it. And then within a week of that, respond to the survey about your experience so that we can capture those problems and questions so we can work on answering and solving them. Always, as always, please reach out to me with any questions or concerns at any time. Text, phone call, email. Our next meeting, I have that on for April 15th at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's 9 Central. Is that a good time, or do you all prefer the 11 o'clock time? Or do you care? All right, you'll get that, a new calendar invite for the April 15th at 10 a.m. Eastern for our next meeting. Okay, well, that was a lot today, a bit to soak in. Again, thank you for taking the extra time to be part of this. You're going to be so invaluable to helping me help everyone else. So very much appreciated. Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.